So before we even start, we're going to kind of before we get not before we start before we get into the news going on today with this stuff. We're going to kind of do a little background now, and I want to start with I use this. This is probably my most used scripture because it's just so full of so much prophecy. It's incredible how much prophecy is packed into these three verses. But so I want to go through this. 1 Timothy 4, 1 through 3. It says, "Now the Spirit expressly says that in the latter times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons." We're seeing a lot of that. That does play a part into this alphabet stuff. But the part I want to focus on is a little bit further down. Speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their own conscience seared with a hot iron. Right here, we haven't talked about this part yet, but I want to talk about it now. Forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from food which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. Now, I mean, we've pretty much touched on everything else on here, and we'll continue to do that as we progress. But the forbidding to marry part is very interesting. And there's the obvious aspect of that's a pretty significant thing, but the obvious aspect of, well, we're getting to the point now where everybody is going to be androgynous pretty much. Everybody's just going to be it. They're trying to get away from the separate genders and sexes and everything like that, where everybody's just going to be it. And so when you get to that point, they're probably going to be getting ready to marriage at that point. I'm sure there's other aspects to that as well. But if we go back in history, it's interesting because if we take it back to the 1700s, now this is something it's been tossed around. It's not really the term, the expression I was looking for, but it's kind of been tossed around. But if you go back to the 1700s, there was a woman by the name of Anne Lee, or known as Mother Anne Lee, and she was the leader of the Shakers. She was the one that brought it from England to the American colonies, and one of the main focuses on this was celibacy. Now, she taught we needed to be unmarried and abstain from sex, and she claimed this was given to her by God through a vision. Okay, I'm not going to go into the whole history of this woman. If you really want some interesting, she's a character. So if you want some interesting reading, you can definitely look into her. But she was whacked out, and she claimed that she had all these visions, and Jesus came to her and said, we have to practice celibacy. We can't get married. We can't procreate. We can't have sex. We can't do any of this stuff. It needs to stop, which that goes straight against Scripture, as we know. That's what we're called to do, multiply. But that line of thinking never went away. It's just being introduced in different ways now, and we know it'll eventually get to the point of actually forbidding it. Now, how they're going to do that, I don't know. We can see the build up to the point, but how they're going to do it, I don't really know how to answer that. But we are seeing stepping stones to it. And so abstaining from sex is another aspect of this, because we know part of the goal is to reduce the numbers. That's another. Check out my Telegram. It's a code word. I can't. Some people are getting away with saying it on YouTube, but I've also seen some people who, when they talk about this, they're getting hit. So I'm just going to go ahead and stay away from it. So if you don't know, check out my Telegram. Got my code words on there. Reduce the numbers. So that's part of the goal of this. So slamming the alphabet agenda into society and raising children into it will create an environment that abstains from procreation. Now, this is something from 1984 as well, where they made it illegal for people to get married and to have sex and procreate and all this stuff. Except under certain things. This isn't a 1984 podcast. I'm not going to explain all that, but that was part of it. So there's another aspect of. A lot of people want to say 1984 was a warning, but I look at it and go, are you sure that wasn't more predictive programming? Are you sure that wasn't a guidebook, a glimpse into what is coming? Definitely a different view on that, but procreation is going to be part of that. And so by slamming the alphabet agenda into the kids, because as we know, If you can get to the kids, you can change everything. That's what Satan wants to do. He knows to destroy the family in order to corrupt society, to destroy the earth and bring in his kingdom that he wants to bring in. It's getting to the kids. And so if you raise up an entire generation that falls in line with this alphabet agenda where you can't procreate with them or you just don't want to, you're starting to reduce the numbers that way. And we're seeing this attack on kids. And a lot of it has been the books and all the stuff in the schools and the libraries and everything. Some of the stuff that we're seeing is like this, that are for kids. These are some of the books that are made for kids. Well, that's what they say, at least. You can see some of this stuff. I mean, you got the big ones there. This book is gay. And then you've got, yay, you're gay, now what? Then there's The Girl with Two Dads, Identity, Gender. I mean, this is the stuff that they're trying to feed to the children and stuff. And then they're also doing, because that's pretty obvious. That's obvious. It's pretty easy to see. But they're also doing it in subtle ways. Now, if you can see it, might be difficult to see, but it's there. This is from the new Spider-Verse movie that's coming out. I think it's the second one coming out. And in the trailer, hanging above the door is a soup flag that says, "Protect trans kids." They're doing it in subtle ways, and people don't realize when it comes to the mind, that little stuff, because you've seen all, or you've heard all the stuff, seen all the stuff about subliminal messaging and stuff and how it feeds, into the mind and everything. Well, that's that. The small little thing right there that you may not even notice as that continues to flash through the minds of children, they're going to pick it up. They're going to get it. And that's what they're trying to do. So they're trying to accomplish this goal in various ways. And part of that goal of destroying procreation, of reducing the numbers, is by slamming this agenda into kids. And as we know, God doesn't take lightly to kids, because if you go to Luke 17:2, and yes, I use this specific image because of how absolutely satanic and horrific Disney is, if you haven't figured that out. I specifically use this one. It says, "It would be better for them to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around their neck than to cause one of these little ones to stumble." This is something that God does not play around with. God gives two specific warnings in Scripture to not mess with. One is the gospel. Don't you dare mess with the gospel. And number two is his kids, his little ones. Don't you dare mess with his little ones. And right now, we've got society led by Satan's agenda just doing a full-on attack on the kids. So we see that. But then we also see another way, which is through infertility. Now, we got to be careful about this one. I can't go too far into this, but we got to be careful. But another one is through infertility. And we're seeing that. If you take a look at some recent numbers over the past couple of years, going to about 2021 to now, you're starting to see a lot of numbers about not just women, but men dealing with infertility. You're seeing a lot of miscarriages. You're seeing birth rates drop. Now, a lot of the birth rates dropping is because of this bringing in and accepting of the alphabet stuff. So obviously that's dropping as well, but you're also seeing it through other various ways. Now, we can also take a look at this through predictive programming. So we just talked about predictive programming with 1984, but if we look at it, there's a movie called Children of Men, which came out in 2006. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but the premise of Children of Men is the year is 2027, the last days of the human race. No child has been born for 18 years. So the whole premise of this movie is, and they never explain why. They give you things to think about that it could be, like genetic testing. That's one of the things. But what happens in this movie is for the past 18 years, women have been infertile. They cannot get pregnant. And so society is on its basically last generation because they can't breed anymore. And so that's part of it. So we're looking at more of the predictive programming as far as this goes through movies, and they always tell us what they're going to be doing. So when you look at it, let's see, we've got the pounding of the alphabet into the kids for that. Then we've got the infertility stuff going on that we can't get into on here, obviously. But this is, again, leading to stepping stone to the point where, just like in 1 Timothy 4, where it talks about forbidding the marry, we're going to get to that point where they're going to do that. And this is just another aspect of it. So we talked about some of that stuff, kind of give a little history on Ann Lee and all that stuff and the different things. But where I want to focus is on this alphabet stuff. Now, to do that, we got to go and take a look at none other than some WEF agenda that's going on with this, because if you guys didn't realize, this whole alphabet thing is in it. And we'll just go ahead and start off with this. Davos and the alphabet agenda. Take a look at the date that came out. January 20th, 2015. What was, like, I don't think ratified is the right word, but certified, signed, however you want to put it, in 2015? I think there was an agenda document that was signed that same day. Yeah, I think so. But if you go back, this is fully a part of the agenda that they want to do. Why? Well, reducing the numbers, I believe, is definitely part of that. Plus, there's a satanic thing that we'll get to a little bit later. So